As the 20th century drew to a close, an idea was gathering momentum in Nevada, an idea that was experienced by people from around the state. The idea was to create a statue honoring a special person in Nevada's history who had made a difference, a person who had inspired great change. The figure would be placed in Statuary Hall in Washington, D.C., where each of the 50 states is entitled to 2 figures. Nevada had yet to create its second sculpture. It was a daunting task, and it was achieved. On March 9, 2005, in the nation's capital, the statue was dedicated. It commemorates Sarah Winnemucca, daughter of a Paiute chief, an educator, interpreter, author, and most of all, a seeker of peace between the races. This moment before the eyes of the nation was the culmination of hard work and a dynamic partnership between Nevadans and their state government. This is Gwen Clancy for the Nevada Department of Cultural Affairs, and today on Exploring Nevada, we'll take you from Reno and Carson City to Colorado to Washington, D.C., and back to our state capital to weave the tale of this remarkable project inspired by a woman ahead of her times. The dream started years earlier as the story of Sarah Winnemucca commanded increasing attention. At that time, we talked with several key people who moved the idea forward. What is it that is so compelling about Sarah Winnemucca?
Sarah Winnemucca's achievements were really extraordinary. She was a spokeswoman for the Paiutes for many years. She served the U.S. Army as a scout during the Bannock War. She barnstormed the Northeast, lecturing more than 300 times on the plight of her people. She was an author who wrote the first book by an Indian woman, and she started a model school for Indian children. It's not a surprise that her father, Chief Winnemucca, said at the end of the Bannock War, "None of us are worthy of being chief but her." A woman who walked out of a Stone Age world into the parlors of the intellectual elite and the halls of Congress. It was quite a journey.
We've just been so impressed with this woman and her accomplishments. So we looked around to see how could she be further honored. She's had so many honors. And we realized that Nevada had never put its second statue back in Washington, D.C. So we thought, well, why can't we do that? This is an all-volunteer organization, but we do get things done.
Recognizing Sarah's superb qualities, the Nevada Women's History Project stepped up to the plate, enlisting the help of Assemblywoman Marcia DeBraga to secure unanimous support from the Nevada State Legislature and diving into the task of raising $150,000.
And we looked at the numbers and said, well, if everybody in Nevada gave $1, that would be it, but we knew everybody in Nevada wasn't going to give $1. So we went with organizations and people. We hope this to be a people's project. We have received as little as $1 in the mail. Many people have written to us and said, what can I do? And we're moving in that direction. We have a trifold, which we put together. It has a biography of Sarah Winnemucca, a little bit about her, and on the back it has a blank where you can send us money.
They held fundraisers, gathered donations far and wide, and many months later, sufficient funding was in place for the project to begin. A statue selection committee appointed by the governor and legislature, with members drawn from around the state, conducted a national search for the sculptor and unanimously selected Benjamin Victor, the youngest artist ever commissioned to create a work for Statuary Hall. We talked with him as he worked on his clay model at the State Library and Archives in Carson City.
They're very delicate, to do the eyes. She had very dark, intense eyes. I think that they showed a lot of her character. So if I had to pick one feature that really said who Sarah was, I think it would be the eyes. They had that look of determination and intensity, especially in a couple of her photos in particular. She just really personified perseverance, I think. She wasn't afraid to work hard, and so she had these strong hands, you know, with a lot of wear on them, I could see. So that was a fun part too, doing like the details on the hands with, you know, just using a simple dental tool, cost a couple bucks at the store, and just doing every little wrinkle and line, and giving them really that worn look, you know, that she must have done a lot of hard work. And she talks about that too in her book, washing clothes for money, and doing all types of what we would call hard labor nowadays. It was neat that they had so many photos of her, but back then they shot very stiff photos. She was standing still and had a serious look on her face in almost every single photo. So I wanted to capture sort of the essence of her spirit or her personality, rather than just use a standard pose of her standing there, you know, with one arm by her side or something like that. So I started designing, and I thought of a few things. It had to be a dynamic design, and it had to be something that she was in motion, because she was an activist. So she should be moving forward, I think. It relates real well as a metaphor to her cause and for her life. So I started with this sort of spiral design that I just drew out in an abstract drawing that curves upward and then raises, you know, sort of uplifting, moves the piece upward. And once I had that design, I was trying to relate it somehow to the concept of the brotherhood of all mankind, which was a quote from her book that really personifies who she was, the brotherhood of all mankind. She believed that people could get along from all different walks of life, that all different types of people could coexist in harmony and in peace. So that was pretty hard. That was a pretty tough concept for me to embody that in one figure. And one night I was looking through one of my art books, and I saw the Statue of Liberty, Auguste Bartholdi's. It's actually titled "Liberty Enlightening the World," and it gave me an idea to subtly relate her to that figure, because it's such a known figure in America and around the world as being a symbol of brotherhood of mankind, of all different types of people coming together. And Sarah was a little different. Like I said, she had to be in motion and couldn't be quite as stiff and static or classical as Liberty. Instead, she has to be more down to earth and more realistic, because she was kind of a people's hero. And that's where the concept started, with the one arm raised. Now the flower relates to peace and harmony in artwork in an artistic sense as an icon, but it also relates to Sarah's name. Thakmatoni was her name in Paiute, and that means shellflower, literally. So I thought the flower was a really good idea to make it the focal point of that whole spiraling upward design, because then it relates to her life's cause, peace, and it also talks about her culture and her name in Paiute. And along the way, I didn't want to pass up the icon of education. Sarah she was the first Native American woman to write a book in English ever, and that's a huge accomplishment. That's a huge part of her life. So the book relates really well in artwork as an icon for education, and to say that the person in the portrait is educated, which Sarah was, but it also works on the level of being a literal reference to her book that she wrote, Life Among the Paiutes. So the design really nicely, with all of the details, kind of brings the eye up the piece and into the icons that I wanted it to, across to her intense eyes here, and then the gaze of her eyes brings you out to the flower. So the piece reads really well in that way. I think it has a nice flow to it overall. Being able to study a great person like Sarah at a young age just helps form who I am and who I will become. definitely this project and the involvement and the studies that I've had to do of her life have already made positive changes in my life. So I think that it's just a wonderful thing all the way around.
What kind of change, can you describe one of the changes that's happened to you since doing this?
I think that I've become a little bit stronger-willed when I know something is right. You know, she really wasn't worried about what people thought too much, and I consider myself a pretty sensitive person, and so I think a lot of times one of the downside of being sensitive is that you worry about what people think or say a little too much. And so I think studying Sarah has made me realize that really, when you know something's right, it's not what everyone else is saying around you. You know, it doesn't matter if it's popular or if people maybe persecute you like they did to her because of it, that you should just stick to what you believe in and do what is right. And I think in that way it's helped me mature a lot studying her.
Excitement built as Ben neared completion on Nevada Day weekend of 2004. A steady stream of visitors eager for a look at Ben's work and a word with the artist came by the gallery at the Nevada State Library and Archives.
I think the flower is a nice finishing touch to the piece because it's her namesake, and it's the final point along the piece. It's the highest point, so it's really a nice finish to it.
And how does it feel to be done?
It feels good. It's kind of it's a mixed feeling because I put so much of my heart and my time and my mind into my work that to actually finish is a sad thing in a way. It's happy because it's very fulfilling, but it's also kind of sad because now I let go of this creation, this sculpture that I've made.
So it looks like you're almost done with it. Where does it go from here, and what needs to happen, and when do we see it again?
Well, now at the end of the month, I'll hopefully have the piece finished and ready for the molds to be made. And after the molds are made, it'll be cast in bronze. And that process is really involved. It'll take at least 3 months before the bronze is finished.
In November, the completed clay model was carried out of the State Library and Archives, loaded into a van, and transported off to the foundry in Colorado.
Basically, a mold is made on this piece in pieces. So like you'll have a separation here for the bust, the chest, and the lower body and the legs, the arms. Everything has to be done in a separate mold, and then waxes are poured. And then I'll come in and chase the waxes and smooth them over so that you can't see any of the seams. And then those waxes will be dipped in a ceramic shell about 8 times and then passed through a high temperature oven which melts the wax out. And then that place where the wax was in the shell, molten bronze will be poured. And then after that's cracked off, you have a bronze copy of the piece. And of course, it still has to be worked with some tooling to doctor up any welds or anything like that.
String down against the piece, but this doesn't really go against there, it comes out to that.
So I can cut it off.
Yeah. Ryan and his work, he's creative about how to solve problems, and this piece is not an average piece. It has different problems than most pieces. You know, like all these fringes that really are uncastable. You can see right there, if you pan over here, all the little clay fringes that I made in Nevada for the original. You can't mold all those. So what he did is he thought of an idea to twist some of them and to do some out of regular rod, so that when we weld them on here, you know, I can still bend them with the sweep of the piece. It's just like when you worked on the clay and stuck them in there and then bent them. Same thing. But he thought about what would look best, you know. And sometimes some of the workers like to get the stuff out of their shop as soon as possible, and they don't really care if it looks, as long as it looks all right, you know. But it's really about the, you know, especially for a piece like this, it's really about perfection.
And then it's sandblasted and treated with chemicals called patinas, and that gives the bronze different tones or colors.
And I try to only use classical patinas, traditional patinas, not modern paints or pigments. I try to only use, I mean, I guess if they're used really subtle, there's really no problem with adding pigments and things like that. I've seen some really beautiful ones, but on mine I prefer the traditional stuff because it just shows the material a little bit better. I think people can tell it's bronze. I've agonized over that patina for, well, since I won the competition. Finally, after all those months and months of agonizing, I feel pretty good about the one that we're going to put in Statuary Hall.
When the complex casting process was finished, the statue was ready to head east to Washington, D.C.
Sarah, I believe, as did my mother, I know, when she talked, and from some of my Indian beliefs, must be put to rest. She's been wandering around the world, and now is a chance for her to be laid to rest in a place where she wanted to be, in Washington, D.C. We need to have someone shine up there.